Okay, we've seen the on-click method work when we press the button. It called the function getJSON and put this call worked into a box on the screen. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to replace the script where it came from. So if I cut it from there and place it back in the head and save it and just make sure it works still. So if I reload the page and press me, there we go, we've got the message. And I'm going to make a few changes. But first of all, I said that JavaScript is very frustrating because there's no real debugger for it. And strange things seem to occur, which you need to sort of get your head around if you're going to program successfully in JavaScript. The first one is this worked. This is pretty standard way of describing methods and functions is to have them in camel case. I've got onClick there with a capital C, and I've got getJSON with a capital J. It's just the way I write my programs. I'm quite used to using camel case. However, we have to be careful in JavaScript. Not everything is in camel case, and this is one example. Actually, if I sort of replace that with a lowercase c on click and saved it and then reloaded the page, it is still going to work. So we have to be very careful what we do, particularly in this next section where in JavaScript the case is important. So what I'm going to do is actually take all of this out. I'm not going to have the button know how to click itself. So if I take that out, the button just has no idea what to do when it's pressed. Again, save it. I run back to the page, press me, and there you go, nothing's happened. So it hasn't got a clue what to do. And I'm going to describe what to do in pure JavaScript, and I'm going to do it in my script, between my script element tags. Now, when a file is run, a HTML file, it's sort of parsed from top to bottom, and it looks for code that it can do. It will not jump over the script code. It will look inside the script code to see if there's any code that it can execute straight away. Any code that doesn't begin with the word function will load up when the page loads up. So for example, if I put alert and put a message on the screen, this is weird. Okay, it won't jump over these script tags. It will actually, when the page is loaded, run this line first before it does anything else. So let's see that in action. So I'm just going to refresh the page, and there we go. I haven't even pressed the button, and it says this is weird. So that's proving that it looks for anything that's not preceded with function and executes that line. So we've got to be very careful when we write these lines. Now, one of the ways that we play around with JavaScript is to sort of do it on the fly. That means build the page as we go along. And one of the ways we can do this is by referring to all of these items on the page. Now, previously I've called these tags, so I've probably called that a button tag and an end tag. Really, the word for that is element. They are elements on the page. So anything between angled brackets is called an element. And that is important now, because I'm going to write a line of code which is going to check out this element, this button element, and act on it. First of all, I'm going to give the element a name. If I can just call it my button. There we go. So this button has got a name called my button. It's identified by my button. These have to be unique. So if I had another button on the screen, so if I had a second button on the screen, I can't call that one my button either. I've got to call it my button 2 or something so that it's unique. So it's got different IDs. But I don't want a second button on the screen, so let's get rid of that. I want to be able to address this button, talk to this element button, and sort of handle its click, but in JavaScript. And the way I do that is outside of a function. I mean, it could appear inside of a function, depends on what you're doing, but I'm doing it as the page is loaded. I'm grabbing the information about the button and then attaching a sort of on-click device to it. So I specify the document, which is the page, and then I say get the element, so it's anything in angle brackets, by its ID, and I need to specify which one I'm talking about. So in this case I've only got one, it's called my button. Remember, I could have had my button too if I'd have kept both buttons on there. And then I want to say I'll have it on click. Now notice I put everything in lowercase here, and that is important, and I'll come to that in a second. So what I'm doing is attaching on click to, it's a listener basically. I don't really want to use the word listener because I'm going to demonstrate that shortly. It's a listener that is placed on the button for whenever the mouse presses it, and what happens is that it's got its own function, and the body of that function just calls the function that we created, my JSON. Okay, that's it. So that should work. It's not going to, and I'll explain why in a second, but the line of code is correct. So if I save that and then reload the page and click on press me, nothing happens. I haven't got a box. The reason for that is where the script has been placed. I placed it back in the head, which was quite happy when it was playing around with the button, and we had an on-click listener in the button itself, but now it's not going to work because it's getting to this place first and checking out what element my button is, but that element isn't being written to the page until a little bit later. So that's where it's being written, and we're trying to access it from there. So this piece of code, this script, needs to come after my button for it to work. So if I highlight that, Control X, and then go and place it back here as we had it before, but if we'd have been there I wouldn't have been able to show you. So this should now work because we are, as the page is being loaded, it's going from top to bottom, it's finding the button and the ID first, and then it's deciding to have a look for my button, which it should know about now. So if I save that, reload the page and press me, there we go, I've got the call working again. The next thing I want to show you about this is the on click. Now when we were in the button and we had on click, I did it both ways. I did it with a lowercase c and I did it with an uppercase c, and it just didn't matter. So I'm going to try that here. I'm going to put an uppercase c on there for on click and save the program. Go back, reload the page and press me, and nothing at all. It's not having it. So when we are writing in JavaScript, this on click here must be the lowercase c. Now I would like to say that everything is like this, just all lowercase, but it's not. A lot of it is camel case. So you're going to be very, very careful what you do with these things or how you use them. So just check that this is working again. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm actually going to change this one now. I'm actually going to add the listener to the button explicitly, and it's very similar. I still need to get the document and then get the element by ID, but instead of doing on click, and you might find this a better way, I don't know, it's just an equivalent way, I can put add listener. Now notice that this is in camel case. Sorry, add event listener. So it's listening. We're setting up an event listener, and the event that we are listening for is the click event. Now notice that's all in lowercase, and we need two parameters in this argument list, and the second one is, well, once we've put the event listener on and we've clicked it, where do we go to? We type get JSON. Another important thing to notice here is that we do not use the open and close parenthesis as we've done before. We just give it the name. So this is like a little callback function, and that's what it is. It is a callback whenever we click the button. So this should be exactly the same as last time. So when I save it, reload the page and press me, there we go, the call works. Again, if I move this script back to the head, oh, let's just put it above the button and save that. Reload the page, press me, it's not working. So it wasn't just because it was in the head of the document, it's actually because we are trying to access my button before we actually declare it on the page. So that works quite nicely. Let's put that back to where it's supposed to be. Now, I'm going to go into some little strange method here. At the moment, I've got this as a button, but it doesn't matter because I'm just talking about any element. Now, any element is anything that I could use as a tag. So let's imagine that instead of having a button here, I had a paragraph. Okay, and we've dealt with paragraphs before if you've watched the earlier videos. So there we go. I've now got a paragraph, not a button. So if I'm going to save that, reload the page, there we go, I've got a paragraph. Now, if I press that paragraph, it works. So what I've done is I've added a listener onto that paragraph. Whenever you click it, as you've said in here, it's worked and it's called this function. The same would happen with all the other methods that we use. So if I get rid of that, if I comment that out so it's not working, and instead of having ID, if I had here on click, let's keep it all lowercase, we need to call the function get JSON. This time we need the parenthesis. So I've made this like the button, but I've used the paragraph tag. I'm not calling this, I've only got this function that will work. Let's save that, reload the page, press me, it's worked. So just having an on-click event on the button just didn't belong to a button, it belongs to any element. And as a last sort of check, if I change that back to ID equals, let's do something completely different, wow, and I'm going to change this line document get element by ID, and this one is called wow, not my button. I'm going to do the on click again, so on click all lowercase equals a function, and that function is just going to call get JSON parenthesis again. Notice the only time we didn't need the parenthesis was when we did the add listener. So this should also work along with the paragraph tag. So let's reload the page and press me, there we go. And let's just make sure that we're not, that we have changed the page. Let's change the message in here just to make sure. Reload the page. This worked again. So that's why JavaScript can from time to time be a little difficult to work with, because there's so many different ways you can do exactly the same thing, and it looks quite intimidating, I must admit. It looks very intimidating. It's practice. if you want to be a JavaScript programmer in the long run, then you'll get used to it. If it's just for a project and you don't want to ever see it again, then you'll have an appreciation of how it works, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. It is different to Python and different to Android and Java. There are one or two tricks which you need to know, and how it works is going to give you a lot of head scratching in your debugging sessions, but it's worth it, and we're going to use it in particular to sort of fetch information from another website, use that information in the same page, and populate something like a map or something. So that's our first look at JavaScript and the different things it can do.